February 15th, 1907, page 205. I found myself seeking out an old classmate this evening, a girl who has known me for much of my life. My meeting with her was revealing in a way. She showed me where I belong. Mr. Soper sent me out of the office early so he could have a private talk with yet another strange man, which I must confess I did not like. It disturbs me when he keeps things from me. I wandered up 6th Avenue in the orange sunset, not wanting to go straight home, and I followed the springtime hints of snowmelt and longing soil. I felt the springtime hints of snowmelt and soil, longing for someone to talk to. I felt as if one of the swarm of creatures all draw upwards in the same direction. I passed the shoemakers and the butchers and the bakers and all the office buildings that line the avenue. I looked into the faces of the winter-weary with curiosity. I'd been so absorbed in my own life that I had forgotten that others existed. I felt desirous of something fresh, a scent, an item of clothing. Weaving in and out of the stores on the avenue, I purchased a scone, but it didn't fill me. My hunger was not for food. Upon reaching 34th Street, I glanced in the windows of Macy's, and I thought I saw Josephine at the counter. I stared, unsure. I entered the department store and found it was another girl, similarly tall and pretty. I inquired after Josephine, and the girl told me that Jo was in a family way and had been let go. I suddenly wanted to see her. I went to the East Side apartment where her mother told me that she'd moved to the West Side with her husband, William Stryker. As I seemed to be on a mission, I jumped onto the nearest omnibus and rode west. I knocked at the door of her townhouse, and Josephine herself answered. We looked at each other without speaking. Her extreme plumpness and the green tinge around her face shocked me. "Prudence," she said finally, "what are you doing here?" I shrugged and I shook my head, strangely happy to see her. "Well, come in. I was just about to settle down for some tea," she said. She showed me to a pretty lacy paradise of a parlor. On her fingers diamond sparkles, and for a moment I wanted what she had, a rich husband, a quiet place to read, long empty days of waiting. A serving girl came in with tea and white cookies. Josephine popped a whole one in her mouth and chewed and giggled. "These cookies are the only thing that make me feel better," she said. "Cookies and ice cream and sweet potatoes. Everything else makes me sick." "You must drink milk and eat plenty of raw meat to have a good baby," I told her. "Ugh, meat, I can't even stand to smell it," she said. "And when your baby comes, you must have your nurse fix it a mix of raw eggs and cow's milk," I said. "Keep it fat and healthy." She stuck another cookie in her mouth and tilted her head, crunching and looking at me. "You work for your mother at the Midwife, don't you?" she asked. "I used to," I said. I was surprised she remembered. "Do you think you could tend to me?" she asked. "Doesn't your family have someone?" "The lady my mama used died. Will's mother wants me to go to Sloane's, but I'd rather use your mother if she can make it. Maybe you can come too," she said. She couldn't hide the fear of childbirth. She seemed very alone. I wanted to promise her I'd help her, but I thought of my job and how Mr. Soper needed me. "If you can, Prudence, I would feel so much safer with you here. You there," she added. I nodded, and I wondered what her life was truly like, being married and with child at the age of 17. Was it as easy as I assumed? Did her husband treat her kindly? "How is William Stryker?" I asked. She chewed another cookie, looking over me. "You've never been in love, have you, Prudence?" she said. I saw how she viewed me, a dull girl with her nose stuck in a book, a brain without a heart, how I wanted to tell her about Mr. Soper and the feelings that so troubled me, how I wanted to free the ache that lived in me day and night. "Love makes everything else seem unimportant," she sighed. I looked at the surface of her shiny, pretty eyes. Her words started a fresh pain in me. I wanted to push her away, to leave her. I could not tell her about my feelings. "I must think about my studies," I blurted. "What studies?" she asked. "At the Department of Health and Sanitation where I work, there's a woman doctor. She has encouraged me." "A woman doctor?" Jo exclaimed. She laughed. "Yes, of course, you've always been a doctor, Prudence. The way you study those books, like you're actually something interesting in there." I smiled and lowered my eyes, taken aback by her outburst. She said, "I remember in school, you spent whole days just staring out the window, cloud of thoughts above your head that no one else could see. Yet when our teacher asked you a question about the lesson, why, you could turn to her and always give her the right answer, and none of us ever knew how you did that." I looked at Josephine. In school, I had been so unhappy. I was different. I had spent most of my days imagining I was somewhere else. In a flash, I recalled my conversation with Dr. Baker. She talked about the case, about girls who marched in the streets. They did not sit around thinking they changed the world, but maybe they started out like me, as doubtful, questioning girls. Girls who long to use their minds for a good and meaningful purpose, no matter how difficult the choice may be. There's a women's medical college in Pennsylvania, I said. You'll be Dr. Galuski, Joe said. It seemed so clear to her. Dr. Galuski, I repeated softly. Yeah, that's who I'll be. Josephine clapped her hands and laughed. A woman doctor, she said, and how that will turn Mrs. Browning's stomach. A warm grin started in my chest, and it floated up through me and lifted at the corners of my mouth, and I rose to my feet, feeling lighter than I had in days. I will return soon with my mother to check on your progress, I said. I would start doctoring, as Dr. Baker calls it, with Josephine. Dr. Prudence Galuski, Dr. Galuski, Dr. P. Galuski, Dr. P. Galuski. And now there's an article. The New York American. Germs of typhoid carried for a life. Presence kept secret. A case shrouded in mystery by the Department of Health and Sanitation has revealed that a woman cook suspected of carrying the typhoid fever inside her healthy body has been locked up the better part of the month with no chance of freedom. Mary Mallon, hired as a cook by a dozen wealthy families in New York City area, was captured at her place of employ late in January. Mr. Herman Briggs, superintendent of the department, authorized Dr. George Soper and Dr. Sarah Baker to raid the Boeing residence without a warrant in search of this human typhoid germ. Miss Prudence Galuski was on hand to help officers Keevan and Hill arrest the imprisoned the poor, helpless cook, treating her like a criminal for possibly carrying a disease despite her obviously healthy state. The cook is presently being held at the detention hospital on the East River. One unnamed source at the hospital says the department claims that up to 40 people have fallen ill from the food Miss Mallon prepared, but nothing has been proven as of yet. According to several families she cooked for, her meals were tasty and satisfying.